Jó napot kívánok, nagyon sok szeretettel és tisztelettel köszöntök mindenkit. Kremmer Lászlónak hívnak, én leszek a mai napnak a házigazdája. Jelen pillanatban 41-en már itt vannak, szándékosan állítottam le a videót, illetve a zenét, tekintettel arra, hogy az előadónk most írt nekem, hogy valamilyen technikai nehézsége volt a belépéssel, és most újra elküldtem neki a kapcsolódáshoz szükséges információkat, pár perc türelmet kérek, és amint itt van velünk Gábor, akkor tudjuk kezdeni. Időközben szeretném megkérni önöket, hogy legyenek kedvesek visszajelezni nekem, hogy rendben lehet-e engem hallani. A chat ablak segítségével, a chat funkció segítségével kérem jelezzenek vissza, vagy szuper, köszönöm szépen Szilviának a visszajelzést, illetve látom, hogy már Zoltán, Gábor is visszajelzett nekem, kiváló, köszönöm, Imre is, tökéletes, nagyon jó, oké. Pár perc türelmet kérek még, amint itt van a kollégám, akkor elindulunk. Időközben sikerült kimennünk a YouTube-ra is, ott már élőben látható ez az előadás majd, és hamarosan, amikor itt van Gábor kollégám, akkor elkezdjük. Jó, egyelőre még úgy látom a résztvevői listában, hogy nincs, ezért ha megengedik, akkor visszaadom átmenetileg a hangot és a képet a videónak, és addig kérem nézzük a testet. Jó hír az, hogy időközben megérkezett Gábor kollégám. Szia Gábor, hallasz-e bennünket?
Tisztán és érthetően, igen.
Kiváló, nagyon jó, akkor elhárult a technikai akadály. Annyit szeretnék kérni, hogy mostantól co-host vagy, és szeretnélek megkérni arra, hogy oszd meg a képernyődet.
Rendben.
And pretty quickly, I'm going to switch over to English because this is going to be an English webinar hosted by PMI Budapest Hungarian chapter. I can confirm that I can see your screen. I would really appreciate if you could put it in slide show mode. Right now, yep, looks good, excellent. Okay, just the final touch, and then we can get started. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for being with us. My name is Laszlo. I will be your host. I'm the president of PMI Budapest Hungarian chapter. Before we get started, I'd like to welcome all of you to our next Lunch and Learn session. As you know, this is a live session, so the good news is Gabor, our presenter, is with us. And as I mentioned before, this is going to be delivered in English language. And today, Gabor is going to talk about a very important topic, and very probably this is the reason why many of you registered for this live event, because you are interested how to prepare for the CAPM exam in 8 weeks. Without further ado, I'd like to pass over to Gabor. Gabor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Laszlo. And with that, I would say let's get started. So today's presentation will be all about how to prepare for the CAPM exam in about 8 weeks. I'm having a secondary monitor, so I'm not necessarily going to look into this direction. So yeah, please bear with me with that. In terms of the agenda, we'll give you guys a very short introduction. Very briefly, I will touch about what is a CAPM, and then I'm going to dive into the learning concept. Then we'll give you guys a little bit of an understanding of, there are no surprises, and really would like to calling it this way because technically preparing for the exam is, number one, is not rocket science. Number two is technically we know what to expect for the exam. So that makes our life, way much more easier. And then I will go into the details of an 8 weeks preparation cycle. And after that, I was actually been planning to do some drag and drop questions just to give you guys a feel of what are the new type of question which PMI expose for towards the candidates itself. So the second part of the session, hopefully that will be very interactive, where you guys can also contribute. So have the chat ready, loaded, because the second part of the session we also going to needing that as well. Also, I think I would like to make this session very interactive. So in case you have any question, I think you can feel free to add it into the chat. I think we can definitely look into that, also including myself. I will actually be stop time for time to ensure that everybody's on the same page with me with the slides I'm going to share today, just to ensure that we have this common understanding of what I'm planning to kind of deliver for you guys today. Okay. So with that, let's go with the first one, which is going to be a very short introduction. So my name is Gabor Strem, and I'm a PMP. Currently, I do have a 9-to-5, so I consider myself as a project management practitioner, altogether around 12 plus years in project management. And, according to my story, I started CAPM, but I failed. Then I decided to wait until I get enough experience for the PMP. So I went to PMP, failed once, failed twice, only passed the third time. But along the way, technically, what I do learn that even though I have, the latest courses, the latest books, and so on and so forth, until I did not embrace and understand what is the mindset, what is the thinking process, behind the waterfall methodology, for example, and PEM Book 6 that was actually been really, really difficult. And right after that, I was able to kind of, go and finish and get, certified or with flying numbers. And what happened technically right after, so you actually been the one who actually been, kind of went into a very much of a failing path. So, for me to get certified was very painful, a long exercise, also very costly in some extent. But technically, I moved to the other side and technically become almost like a preacher of, helping people, passing the exam. And nowadays, I'm very much occupied with helping people with the CAPM/the PMP exam itself. Okay, so that's all about my 2 minutes fame here. Now, very shortly, what is the CAPM? And I would say I'm not planning to telling you, let's say, lots of big surprises here. But at the end of the day, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. And, I find this PMI fact sheet, which is pointing into 31st of August, which is what it really represents, and which is that CAPM is the second biggest certificate which PMI has at the moment, which is, I would say, I think, is a huge thing. I would say it's a huge number, because if you consider that we have around more than 1.2 million PMPs, the second one is CAPM, and PMI ACP is only the third in this case. Now, why this is so important? Because the way how I see any certification itself is that is your commitment to the career path. So if you would like to be a project manager, or you just start your career, I think you need to demonstrate your commitment to the career path. And that is why you need to get certified. In case of, if you not have, let's say, around 3 years of experience, you need to go with the CAPM, or you would like to enter into the project management career path, or you would like to be a future project manager, you definitely need to go and get the CAPM done, because the prerequisites, I would say, very simple. I just put the screenshot from the PMI website, which is technically looking for your set of education to ensure that you have the necessary knowledge and education to get certified here. So I would say, whoever would like to be a project manager in the future, or you are just the beginning of your career, you definitely have to have the CAPM. Now, project management as such is mainly still, I would say, experience driven. I cannot go into a major university and leave as a project manager, and next day I can jump into a project management job. So the reputation of PMI with all those certifications is, I would say, is very high. And if you ask me, there are also other certificates out there, like like the Google certificate, for example. If you ask me, Google is still like around 15 years behind PMI with the scale they have and the knowledge and the information they put together and the examination itself, which means that all these certifications are very much more valuable than anything else. And I think this gap cannot be kind of changed, cannot be shortened in that extent. So if you make a call, if you decide to get one of those certification, in particular the CAPM, you're making the right choice right there. Good. So let's move on. And now what I would like to focusing on is really the learning concept on the way that what I learned, along those kind of failed exams as well, and technically helping the people to passing the exam, I would say, in the past 12 months altogether. Now, the key thing to understand that, getting certified and preparing for the exam is not like a type of university studies, because what we do know, through the exam content outline, we know exactly what to expect on the exam, which means that PMI will test you in every area which is out there in this entire syllabus. But what does that mean? That you need to know a lot, but certainly you cannot know so you need to know a lot, but you are not able, is not able to learn 100%, which is in the book, in the course, in the preparation material, and only after that go for the exam. So the idea is that we need to go into a build up on a build up on a build up knowledge. And once we're reaching a big period, that's the point when we need to go to the exam or need to consider to go to the exam. Now, what I do see, or what I felt like that's a peak period or peak point should be somewhere around an 80% passing rate prior to the exam. Now, just to make it clear, I do not know the passing rate. Nobody knows, nobody does. PMI not advertising to anyone what is the passing rate of any exam. But what experience showed that if you score higher, the likelihood that you're going to pass the exam is also going to be higher. So I think that's what we need to, let's say, keep in mind. Now, how are we going to do this, or how are we going to achieve this, is that we should start with the exam content outline, which is available to everyone. We can download it from a PMI website, and then we need to form a learning cycle, which means that you need to go through the entire syllabus, I would say only once, and after that you need to turn your attention into a validation cycle. Now, what does that mean? Is since the end of the day, you're going to be validated against questions. So it's really making sense that you spend, I would say, in this entire preparation, the second half around around answering questions. Now, why is that so important? Because if you go through a learning cycle and considering, let's say you have pen book, and nowadays, if you have pen book 6, that's plenty enough for the CAPM. Now you read through pen book 6 within 4 weeks. Do you need to reread it again? I will say the answer will be no. Why? Because you have to start doing questions, because the questions will be the ones which are surfacing any areas where might be a gap in your knowledge. So the idea of recycling, rereading, or redoing your course, I would say is not really, let's say, a sustainable, good idea, if you ask me, because you're going to learn a lot of things, but what you need is a set of clarification altogether, which will come through only if you do the questions. That's why, technically speaking, you need a good mock exam simulator. Now, staying with this learning cycle a little bit, so what you need as a bare minimum for the exam to prepare. You need a type of learning material which will explain to you the predictive cycle, aka the waterfall methodology. And secondly, you need a mock exam simulator. Without a mock exam simulator, you cannot pass this exam. Very sorry to say, if you're not decided to, or you at the moment you have in mind that you're not going to get a simulator, that's not going to be a good idea. You can go and flipping pages of the pen book guide, but that's not going to be the same as if you start doing questions at the same time. Okay. And now it is, I would say, a little bit of a myth to kind of clear in everybody's head. When I put here the learning cycle, and at the bottom I highlight here, courses, boot camps, and trainings. Now I would say you need to decide which one is working for you the best. What I mean by that. So if you are a visual learner, you can go and buy an online course, which can, through videos will explain to you everything what is the waterfall methodology is all about. Or if you are a reading person, you go and get a preparation book, or you go and get the pen book 6. And the reason why I'm saying is that because if I have a course, if I have a boot camp, if I have a book, all these three explain exactly the same. So I would say it's really up to you to decide which one to do, because, for example, if I have the pen book 6, and then for somehow I will get the Ritamu Haki exam preparation book, for example, that's exactly the same. So both books are talk about exactly the same. They are actually being kind of worded and explained slightly differently. And I would say that's just something to understand, because to prepare for this exam, you do not need to a collection of this course, that book, another boot camp, another course, and technically you make it as a never-ending story for the next 6 months by you just gathering information, but you are not able to learn them all. Okay. So far, so good. If you are able to follow, please put a thumbs up into the chat if that's okay with everyone. Yeah, if I can I get, let's say 5? Excellent, thank you very much. All right, so let's move on. There are no surprises where to start. And this has actually been the point when I'm planning to talk about the exam content outline, which is available to everyone, not just for me, to everyone. If you go into the pmi.org website, you go into the CAPM certification, you can download it. Now, where this will start is actually been, what I'm highlighting here is the current outline, which is valid till date. I guess that's not a big surprise that from 2023 January, this is going to change. So there will be a new set of outline, which is already available. But for the time being, that's the outline which we can work upon. If you would like to get certified this year, you should just focusing on the current outline, which is highlighting the following area. Now, the outline is going into the details of, number 1, how many questions you will get in each area. Number 2, what type of questions will be on the exam. So number 3, you will have a clear understanding of what to expect. Because if you check, and that's what this donut chart represents, is technically the number of questions you will get for the exam on each area. Now, if you read through the tasks, technically we can, predict the questions more or less because we know what is the area which PMI would like to cover during those with those questions. So in that sense, I mean, this will be very much predictable. Now, looking into this in a way how you need to read that is that almost every area will have at least, I would say, between 9 to 12 to 13 to 15 questions. And make the long story short, all in all, let me do some drawing here. You need to focus on the right things. Now, what I mean by that, for example, in procurement, you can spend awful lot of time of, reading the 30, 40 pages of, what are the different contract types and, trying to memorize them all. But if you're considering this, you're going to get only 6 questions on return. So how much time I need to spend on that? I would say you need to have an understanding, but I would say you better spend more time on communications because that's where most of the questions will be. So you're going to get 15 questions around communications. So you need to find, let's say, what is the best trade-off for your time and effort to ensure that you are get ready and prepared for the exam. Because what you see on the screen of number of questions, and the reason why I have 13.5, which is just to be very precise with the percentages. Now, what does this exactly means is that just being very precise, but technically what does that mean? You're going to get either 14 questions here, or you might going to get 13 questions around this area. But if PMI will put out there this information, we are fully certain that there will be, let's say, 14 or 13 and not 45 to 65 questions. Okay, so this is actually been fully certain, which means that you do not need to go with the idea, let's say, okay, so scope management, I need to know everything about the scope, which I would say is important to, you need to have a full-blown end-to-end knowledge about scope management and using that example, but PMI will not address you 20, 25, 30, 35 questions on scope management. And I would say that's what I really would like to highlight here, that if PMI says, this is the exam, this is how it will look like, here are the topics, here are the number of questions, this will give us, let's say, a clear understanding and a clear indication what to expect. Because now we can break it down. Through the task, I can actually I can learn it very quickly, what I need to do in terms of the PM role or what I need to learn about scope management, for example. Okay. Also, the outline is technically can give you lots of myth-bustering here, because if I'm asking you the question, what do you think, how many calculation questions will be on the exam? If you have an idea, if it's, between 0 to 5 or more than 5 or more than 10, you can put it into the chat. Let me have a quick look. What do you think, how many questions will be on the exam regarding calculations? Please put it into the chat if you have an idea. Two, okay. I have one response so far. Can I get maybe 2, 3 more? Okay, I like the number 10. Great, maybe one more, 15. Very nice. Now, look into this. So cost management on its own will be 12 questions. Now, cost management on the PMBOK guide is really present in the planning and the monitoring and controlling process group. So what does that mean? So PMI would like, through this 12 question, they will ask you how to plan precisely in terms of your cost, how are you going to get and how are you going to manage your cost baseline, and number 3, how are you going to monitor and control your cost through the entire project. Which means that if I just kind of break this down into these 3 major areas, there are not too many options to have, too many questions around cost calculations anyway. And I would say what my experience showed in the past, I would say 9 to 12 months altogether, if you're lucky, you're gonna get 3 calculation questions. If you're not lucky, maybe you get 1 or you get 0. So I would say that if you are stressed about the numbers and the calculations, you have 2 options here. Number 1, you completely forget about them, because on a bigger picture of 150 questions, what will happen if I miss 3 of them? I would say nothing much. Or you're going to go and still prepare against the questions which are out there. But I would say there are more emphasis nowadays around to understand what is the project status through numbers. So for example, the CPI, the SPI, the schedule variance, cost variance will be still under something which PMI would love to asking you, instead of EAC or BAC or the ETC. I would say, again, you can spend an awful lot of time on doing calculations, but on return of your effort, you're not really looking for more than 3 questions at the moment, or let's say worst case scenario, you're gonna get 4. So so you need to be very wise on your time. And I think what can be the reason for that is because I think PMI realized that whatever project management tool you came across with, having a EAC or ETC calculation can be done very quickly. So you not necessarily need to know the formulas and using a piece of paper and a calculator and a pen to do that for hours and hours and hours, because that's no longer the case, because technically any tool can do this for you. All right. Was this a bit of a surprise to some of you? If you think so, you can put it into the chat as a yes, or maybe a smiley face or something like that. That would be also good. So the key message to everyone, you need to ensure that you're trying to handle stress on the exam. So what I'm trying to mean, that if you go into the exam, so there will be 150 questions within 3 hours. It is very stressful. The clock will ticking on your screen. You cannot help it, or you cannot disappear it. So what you need to do, you need to prepare on the exam on the way that you can technically mimic the exam situation. You are able to handle stress, and you are able to handle situations that, for example, what if I'm going to get a question and the question doesn't make sense, the answers doesn't make sense. Oh my God, what should I do? How should I get started? And with the outline, you can use the outline on the way that you can actually prepare yourself that, okay, I need to know a lot, but I do not need to know everything to go and get certified for this exam. Okay. So it's all about, I would say, the preparation, and we're going to go into details to how to prepare on the right way, and which can get you the right results in the end of the day. Okay. The last thing which I wanted to mention here, that you're going to get 150 questions, where 135 will be scored, 15 unscored. Now, this has actually been a very good one. And the reason why I wanted to highlight is these 15 unscored questions, that nobody knows what are those 15 unscored questions, which means that you need to answer every single question. And that is technically the goal for the exam as well. If you leave something, I think, for unmarked, the end, the software will also ask you that you should have been kind of marked, or at least pick an answer for those questions as well. But the reason why these 15 unscored questions are really, really important, because this is I would say, the playground for PMI, where they're asking you the newer type of questions for all the upcoming exam. They testing newer questions, and also they testing I would say, the public general understanding of different concepts. So for example, if you would like to go to the exam nowadays, I mean, till 31st of December, do I need to work and read the PMBOK 7? I would say is a nice to have, but this exam will not ask you about the PMBOK 7. Whatever question you might have, it will be fall under the 15 unscored category. Number two, what about Agile? The outline is talk about a set of Agile basics, which you need to be aware of. But so you should expect some Agile questions along the way. But again, majority will fall under the 15 unscored questions, considering that the outline and the exam will change from January. Therefore, any kind of pre-questions, which most likely will appear and will be definitely a scored question from January, can appear nowadays. But I would say just you need to be aware. If you prepare, you have an understanding, you are confident in your knowledge, you might gonna come across something which you might not covered, or something might be sounds new. In those cases, that's definitely some type of unscored questions altogether. Okay. So let's move on. Now, in terms of the announcement, so this whole outline is changing from January onwards, which means that in terms of the new outline, the percentages are also changing, which means that there is more emphasis on the adaptive environment and also the business analysis as such, which is technically going to be a change considering how the exam is looking like today. But now this is more in line what is expected nowadays around the PMP exams itself. If you ask me, today is the 12th of October. You still have plenty enough time for prepare for the exam. You better go do it now. Is quicker, faster, easier at the moment. If you ask me if you would like to do it, let's say next year. But that's, I would say, my opinion regarding the subject. Okay. Now let's have a look into this 8 weeks study plan itself, or how should kind of structure this into the right way. Now I talked about the learning, having a learning cycle, having a validation cycle. We went through the exam content outline on very good extent, trying to get some clarity around certain topics. So what this plan will do, it will build upon that, and we'll try to give you more confidence that preparing for the exam, it shouldn't take, let's say, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, because many people actually unfortunately fall into a trap that they're not focusing on the right things. Therefore, if you're looking for perfection, you're almost never going to get there. There is a lot of information to learn, a lot of information to know for the exam. But the way you're going to pass is not necessarily that you know everything 100%, because nobody is able to do that, prior to the exam. And on the exam, I mean, the only thing that really matters that you go and pass. Your employers, the workforce, LinkedIn, everybody's only interested that you are passed or not. The idea of I would like to have everything above target, that's a good personal goal, but in the end of the day, what it really matters is that you're passing, yes or no. Now let's look into this. So how to learn the predictive, aka the waterfall model for the exam. My kind of recipe for this is going to be understanding the 49 processes, how the flow is working, what is the sequence of the knowledge areas, clarify the specific tools and techniques, and also the outputs. Now, this has actually been very important because we need to see that if you understand how does it work, and what is the logic behind the processes and knowledge areas, how the process groups are connected to knowledge areas, and how does this all link to a tool and technique to an output, that will make your life easier. You're going to save, I would say, a lot of time and effort of understanding and clarifying all this, because the way how it's all been described in the different materials is slightly different than how does it working in terms of the logic. And if I can go back and do a little bit of a showing of this, let me highlight here. So this is the 49 processes as per the predictive waterfall methodology. And very short summarization in 2 minutes that why you need to put lots of emphasis here, because the way how this table is described is good. But what does this show is that how knowledge areas are working. So how knowledge area is working in process groups. But that's not reflecting the logic. It's not reflecting the reality in the end of the day. And what also, let's say, how PMI designing those questions. Because let's go with initiating. Everything happens in a sequence. I cannot help it. I have to have the project charter, identifying stakeholders. Then in planning, again, we need to follow the sequence. We cannot break the sequence. So we need to go with scope, then schedule, then cost, and all the others. We have to follow the sequence. Everything's happening in a step-by-step approach. Now, in terms of execution, so this is where we are started to deviate from the entire sequence, because instead of going and direct and manage project work, so how are you going to be able to do that if I don't have a team? So number one, I need to acquire resources, developing the team, managing the team first, to ensure I can actually do the project work. Because otherwise this will not work out. And if you kind of sit down and think this through logically, I mean, how can I, managing the work, having a lessons learned, managing the quality, and then I'm going to acquiring the resources, this idea might not add up. So make the long story short, in execution, the sequence is breaking, whereas I'm acquiring the resources, developing the team, managing the team, and after that, I will actually get the project work done. Then manage project knowledge, manage quality, manage communications, implementing risk, and all the others which are not fitting on the screen are happening at the same time. So they are happening at the same time because simply we are in execution. Now, once we are in monitoring controlling, so the party starts again. So this is no longer a sequence because we're working towards the very last goal in this process, which is the validate scope. So this will be the last point here, which means that all the controlling and monitoring processes are happening at the same time because we're working towards the single goal, which is to complete the validate scope. Because the output here is the accepted deliverable, which has the straight line to close the project or phase. Now, why is that and why is this going to be super important? Because the customer is doing this. And I don't want it to show a customer a halfly controlled scope, a halfly controlled schedule, so on and so forth. So technically, until I not get a thumbs up here, a thumbs up here, a thumbs up here, here, everywhere, I'm not even trying to do the validate scope because the customer were giving me the acceptance. I'm looking for a straight yes acceptance, and that in that case, I can close the project. In case this will be not an acceptance of deliverables, the project is a failure. The project failed. You failed by scope, you failed by schedule, you failed by cost, unfortunately. And that's something which we would like to avoid. Okay. Is there any question before I move on? Was this useful? So far, I mean. Good. Excellent. I got 2 thumbs up. I'm very happy about that. So you need to put some emphasis to understanding the logic, not just only understanding each and every knowledge area, what is happening in each knowledge area, because now, we know through the outline what type of questions will be there. You're focusing on the logic. Now you can focusing on to having the right understanding, and that will trigger, for example, understanding the right set of ITTOs and the right learning of these ITTOs. Because again, ITTOs are something which are very big on the CAPM exam. Everybody's having different way of learning all the 49 processes, each and every ITTO inside. But through the logic, we are also understand that you need to remember this is the best practices to run any kind of project out there. So if I have a construction project, a finance project, a marketing project, building a software, building a skyscraper, whatever project you can think of, I can actually follow this process step by step, and I can actually deliver. It's so pathetically true that if somebody will ask me tomorrow and say, Gabor, can you come and build a nuclear power plant for me? And I will say, let's say this is PEM book 6. I do like this, and I'm actually just have to follow the processes because there is no major rocket science there. Obviously, experience can be a big differentiator here because, for example, collecting the requirements for a nuclear power plant, for me, it might take years, but for the right person, it might take only 2 months also at the same time. So, but I hope you guys get the point that the recipe for success, waterfall predictive cycle, I following the process technically step by step because that's the recipe for success. This is my rope to get things done. If I understand how they're working in conjunction and what is the logic together, I cannot go wrong. So for example, you need to kind of practice this table, understand this table, because when you're going to get a question on the exam, you need to ask yourself, which process group are we in, which knowledge area are we in? And that will help you determine where you are, because if you have an answer which is before the process or later on the process, you can quickly eliminate those answers, and then you're most likely going to find the correct answer very quickly and efficiently. Okay. So let me go back to the slides. Sorry. Okay. So the key emphasis is learning around the waterfall cycle. I would say there are lots of good materials out there. I use the free material. So here is a video which explained by Ricardo Vargas. He's actually having this video, Ricardo Vargas Penbook 6 explanation, already got like, I think 1.5 million views. He explains everything which I just said to you or mentioned for about an hour. So that's way much more detailed than what I did. But for example, if you're preparing to the CAPM and you watch this video twice a week, you save 3 weeks from your overall preparation, because that will help you to clarify, to understand how does it work, and that will be a huge time saver for you. Okay, so that's something which I'm also kind of wanted to share. Now, in terms of the learning itself, trying to learn the knowledge areas in groups. Now, why is that? Because there is a certain logic put behind the different knowledge areas. So for example, when I had the second bullet point around the baselines, each and every baseline follow the same logic to reach the point when I have a baseline, a very detailed, very accurate baseline into the end. The steps are different, but the logic how it works is also but that's also the same. So going with integration and change management. Now, change management is built in integration, which means that you need to just put a little bit more emphasis, because you can get, let's say, a challenging question, which might say, I have 2 change requests approved. One is a schedule management plan update. The second one is a cost baseline update. Which one I should go first? Now, fortunately enough, all the baselines will have higher priority. So any baseline change will go first over any plan updates, for example. And that's something which is, I would say, a little bit of a technical detail, but since the how you handle changes is also something which is very important knowledge for the exam, I think it is great. It's good that you kind of put some emphasis around it. Now, the third bullet point, which is the people domain, which is, again, I would like to combine this together, saying, trying to understand communication, resources, stakeholders together. Because once you have that clarified in the beginning, that will make your life very much more easier. Now, why is that? Because you need to remember, the communication will tell you that what to communicate, the what, sorry for that, the how. So weekly status report, how or when, sorry, when send it weekly, through whom? To the stakeholders. So technically, on the communication plan, the reference to a whom will always be just like stakeholders, and then the details of stakeholders of Jeff, Tim, Michael, all that, so on. Jeff have to receive the weekly report, monthly report, face-to-face invitation, and also all this information will gather around stakeholders. So technically, if you have this clarified in the beginning, you're never going to get wrong any questions around communications, that where I should look for the people who needs to be, in that kind of, weekly status report, and so on and so forth. So that's why ours is very important in terms of resources. Your reward system, your motivation, what type of resources you need, what type of skills you need, they're also around the same area. So again, is easier to understand all together. Now, the last bit here, I would say focus on risk, quality, and procurement. I really would like to leave procurement to the last, simply because you're going to have only 6 questions for this. So only just the main reason. Okay. Now, here is the next very important point, which is forming an exam strategy, which is, I would say that whoever is asking me, I would say you need to choose between 2 strategies. You either go with the 50 questions or the 75 questions type of cap. Now, why this is important? Because you have 150 questions, and then you have 180 minutes to get it done. Now, if I'm going to ask you that, okay, you're preparing for the exam, tomorrow you need to do 100 questions. I think that's very scary on the extent that this is time consuming. So what does that mean? That we need to break this down into more tangible, more consumable kind of pieces. So more consumable boxes. Now, what does this mean, this 50 question cap, or let's go with A in this case, is that you're going to have 50, for the first 50 questions, you're going to have 60 minutes to complete. Now, okay, that's not rocket science, because technically that will follow all the other, blocks as well. But the reason why this is so important, because what does this represent? That you need to build a muscle, we can say it this way, which is that any given time you can do with a high level of focus 50 questions, and your time cap for this is going to be 60 minutes. And how does this will demonstrate on the exam? So if you go to the exam, you do your 50 question, then you pause. If you go to the test center, you stand up, you go out the room for 2 minutes, then you're trying to kind of, regenerate your ideas, and then you go back and you tackle for the next 50 question, because this is mentally exhausting, because you need to demonstrate, you need to do this with a high level of focus. And if you not prepare this in advance, that is going to be just much more challenging looking forward. And I would say that you need to spend more time on the preparation, on the way that you're trying to mimic how you will do this in the exam, rather than trying to think about this, 2 days before the exam. Okay? Because what you need to do, you need to build a strength that you can do 50 questions any given time. Now, obviously, you not start, tomorrow I do 50, because yeah, that's number one, time consuming. Number two is maybe not going to be, let's say, super realistic, but on the upcoming pages, I will go into more details. But eventually, you need to think through how you would like to do the exam before you get started, or even at least halfway through, you need to have an idea, because your entire preparation should support that. And that way is just going to be way much more easier to go and pass the exam. Okay. Now let's have a look into, let's say, the real practicalities of the plan. And what I have here is especially on the left-hand side, is an 8 weeks preparation. So going with the first 3-4 weeks, to be the learning cycle, which means you start with integration, you start with change management, then going into the baselines, then going to the people domain, and then week 4, you finishing the risk, quality, procurement management, and so on. And in that point of time, you started to incorporate in 20 questions on study days, not on the entire week, of course, but you started to do questions, because you need to do the validation of what you learned so far. And then the questions will surface which areas you need to recap, or you need to focus on looking forward, because technically the second part of the preparation and second part of this 8-week cycle should be around the questions, because you need to do questions anyway. So why should I don't know, like spend another 2 weeks of reading? It will help me. I would say not necessarily, because it's easier or better if you do questions and you see how a risk response strategy, categorization is translated into a question, because now you have a reference point, because the wording and of the pen book guide, and also many courses I see that is really hard to digest. But the main reason for that, because that's the best practices of project management. Until I not see a real question or a practice question, is really hard to embrace and say, okay, now I remember because I have a reference point. So make the long story short, from week 4 onwards, you started to do the questions. In this example, we're already going up to 60 questions, which is, I would say, nothing wrong with that, because the way you need to see a study plan, that's a guide. That's not a punishment. That's a guide out there, which means that you can actually follow it. Yeah, trying not to do less, but if you can do more, yeah, also trying to do more. But eventually, week after week, you go and do the more and more questions in this case. Now, along the way, you do 2 full mock exams. Now, why 2 full mock exam? Because the number one, this one is going to be, I'm calling it a reality check. Now, somewhere at this point, if you score between a 50 to a 60% on this mock exam, you are on the right track. I'm telling you, you are on the right track. Because, for example, to reaching the 80%, not sure that you do the calculation, but that's 120 out of 150. Now, let's say the 60%, that's 95. I think that's 95 out of 150. So what does this mean? That you need to add for the remaining 3 weeks, technically 10 correctly answered, 10 more questions plus correctly answered each week. That should be your kind of improvement plan looking forward. And if you think about it this way, you are not too far away from this. And the 80% is might look high, but there are still plenty rooms for failure, and it's okay to making mistakes, because nobody will go in 100% passing rate. Nobody leaves with 100% passing rate. So just to think about that, you need to reach the peak point when you are able to answer almost most of the questions correctly, and that will should be plenty enough for the exam. That's what my experience showed as well. So you do a full reality check, and then you do a second one just to ensure that you are you're following this plan of going with this 80%. Because just from a clarity perspective, the entire knowledge you need to envision as a brick, okay? So preparing for the exam nowadays, predictive life cycle, this is a brick. This is not gonna get bigger and it's not gonna get smaller. So we can slice it this way, we can slice it this way, but also let's say the likelihood that you come, you need to do 5,000 questions or even more is not, there is no such a hard rule. I would say if you ask me, and if I go page by the pen book guide, PMI will most likely not come back with 5,000 questions either. That's why I would say the more emphasis is around the logic, understanding of how to think about the different processes, different tools, and how they kind of all connected together to ensure that you are managing a cost baseline, you're managing a schedule baseline, you're managing a scope baseline, and there's an accepted deliverable into the end. Okay? Good stuff. Now, quick questions around, how many days I should study. My recommendation to anyone is going to be, let's say, 5 to 6 days. You definitely need to do 1 day off to avoid the burnout. Again, this is just, I would say, a guide there. If somebody will tell me, 7 out of 7, I will not do it personally. Why should I tell to anyone? You need to see how you can manage this into your life, because there are students who do, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday cycle, taking Thursday off, and then you do Friday and Saturday in terms of the studies. But I mean, along the way, you're going to learn a lot. But the goal is that it will stay within. So you need to leave time to ensure that this is sinking in. And that's how you do it. Not by overworking it, because in the last 2 weeks of the exam, it will be appearing on your calendar. So you're going to learn a lot, or you're going to study a lot. But at the end of the day, you need to be, put this into digestible pieces day after day, building a discipline, and that's how you're going to kind of win it there. Okay.
Excuse me, Gabor, just a quick one. Let me mute all lines because I hear some background noise. You have to unmute your line then. So I put everyone on mute, and check your unmute button, Gabor. So everybody's on mute now. And please unmute your line.
Okay, I'm back.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, how long I should study on each study day? I would say you need to study between 60 to 90 days, 60 to 90 minutes. Again, do I need to do 2 hours, 3 hours? Now you need to be realistic. I mean, I can do 2 hours or 3 hours today, but what's the likelihood I can do this tomorrow or a day after? So rather you need to find a slot and the method which work for you the best. Now, my kind of secret sauce in the bottom is to try to split your day into 2. Let's say you're doing a morning session and an afternoon session. So what does that mean from a 90 minutes perspective? In the morning, I try to find a 45-minute slot. And then in the afternoon, I'm also trying to find a 45-minute or let's say an hour slot. I leave it to you, because is going with some psychological ideas here. So for example, if you would like to do the exam in the morning, you have to kind of think about it before you get started, in my opinion. But your answer is you would like to do it in the morning, you better to do some type of activities in the morning as well. Because the end goal is that you need to be sharp and focused in the morning anyway. So you need to find, let's say, kind of the solution where you can actually have, let's say, 2 sessions during the day, where is like a 45 in the morning or 45 in the afternoon, which either can be you're watching very focused YouTube videos in the morning, and in the afternoon you do your reading or you do your questions. Because technically speaking, I go back to the idea which I mentioned, that if I have the right videos, the course and the book, they all talk about exactly the same. So you just really need to pick the one which really works for you the best. So that's why, for example, if somebody has a video course about the CAPM prep, do you really need to read the pen book 6? I would say not necessarily, because it will, the course will tell you exactly the same what is in there. For the questions, you're going to need it for sure. So you're going to, going and digging out some answers and reasons if you miss something. But at the end of the day, here everybody's talking about exactly the same. Or the courses, the preparation books, the pen book guide, they're all tell you exactly the same information, but they group it and they put it together slightly differently. Okay. Let's quickly move on. And then I would say I just put here, let's say, a standard study plan, which I normally use for some of my students, and say, okay, so here are your learning targets, your test question targets, and then understanding the big picture and how you're going to do that, focusing on the processes, focusing on documents, EFs and OPAs, agile basics and confusing terms all together, which can, help you to give you a rope altogether. Okay, so let me pause here for, is there any question? Because I think we slowly started running out of time. I'm planning to have maybe 1 or 2 drag and drops, but yeah, let's have open the line if there is any question.
Okay, so thank you, Gabor, so far. So ladies and gentlemen, if you do have any questions or comments to our presenter, please use the chat window and ask the questions through the chat window. So please use the chat window. If you do have any questions or comments, please ask through the chat window. All lines are on mute, so you cannot unmute your line at the moment, if I'm right. So please use the chat window if you have any questions or comments. In the meantime, if you are still with me, I see 68 people on the line. I would really appreciate if you could just send us a thumbs up if you are happy what you learned so far from Gabor. So please use the right icons. I see, wow, 6, 7 thumbs up, 8 thumbs up. You even received a heart. That's pretty cool. I really like it. I need more hearts. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so it looks like there are no questions through the chat window. So let me pass the ball back to you, Gabor. But in the meantime, let me open a poll for a second, and I'm going to ask people to provide their feedback. Oh, Gabor, we just received a question. Can you see the question?
Yes, I see the question as well. Yeah, are there any YouTube channels you recommend us to prepare? Yes, I would say there are some. If I think lastly, you will allow me to copy that specific video, which I have it on the slide as well. I think that will be definitely the one which you can use for the preparation. This is not done by me. Obviously, I do have a YouTube channel if you like the delivery I do and the explanations, but yeah, this is more about sharing you guys the necessary information, how you can, let's say, the most efficient way to prepare for the exam, considering this is changing by end of this year. Yeah, so we don't have, let's say, another 3 months, another quarter to prepare. I would say that's still doable because we already able to break this down into the most digestible, smaller pieces where people can, you can understand, you can get this done, go and pass, done and dusted.
Thank you very much. And you all received the link to the specific video what Gabor mentioned. So if there are any further questions or comments, please use the chat window and just let us know. Okay, let me pass the ball back to you, Gabor, then.
Okay, in that case, let's do, I would say, a question instead, because for the drag and drop, I would like to, unmute everyone, because if there will be a brave volunteer, we can do this together, but the drag and drops are slightly different, but let's do a question maybe on a given time. Okay, so let's do that.
So for your information, I modified the settings and people can unmute their lines. So ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to speak up and if you hear a question and you know the answer, then please unmute your line. Back to you, Gabor.
Okay, thank you very much, Laszlo. So this has actually been a drag and drop question, which is looking for, we need to identify project management plans, not a rocket science. On the left-hand side, you have the orange boxes.
I beg your pardon, are you sharing anything? Now I can see your screen share. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really sorry for that. So this is a drag and drop question, which is looking for project management plans. Now, the assignment is very simple. We need to look into the orange boxes and we need to ones which are definitely project management plans. Now, we can do this in 2 ways. If there is a brave volunteer who would like to volunteer, that would be awesome. Or we can do it together as a group as well, where you guys contribute either to the chat or you voice it over. Is there any brave volunteer? Let's start with that. Okay, in that case, I will go ahead and we will do this together. So let's go with the first one. So change management plan. If you think that's the PM plan, please put a yes or a Y into the chat and that will be plenty enough. Yeah, I have 1 yes, that's good. Very good. That's exactly right. What about the activity list? Is the activity list a project management plan? Okay, we have one no, okay. I would say that's yes. So technically, activity list is a project document. The key differentiator between the two is that while we are in planning, we're working against to having 18 plans altogether, full-blown, accurate, and approved. And technically, the main difference is that so once we have moving into execution and onwards, if I would like to make any change on the plan, I'm going to need a change request. Whereas any document out there, I can quickly modify it. Nobody needs to review it. Nobody needs to put the, providing the blessing, because they are documents which I need on a day-to-day basis to ensure I can run my projects more efficiently. Very well done. Quality matrix, is it a plan or a document? Again, we can follow with the yes or no. If or still, is there a brief volunteer? I'm very happy to with that as well. Okay, we're going with the chat. Yeah, that's correct. So quality matrix is also a project document. Performance measurement baseline, a plan or a document? Okay, so the performance measurement baseline is actually in a project management plan where we talk about collectively the three baselines all together: the cost, the scope, the cost, and the schedule. That's where when we talk about the performance measurement baseline. Cost management plan. Yes. Yeah, I think Ben's having the right attitude here. Yeah, let's put everything which ends with the plan into the PM plan area, and that is fully correct. So let's say we can speed this up a little bit. So yeah, the change log, milestone list, resource breakdown structure, or known as RBS, or schedule forecast, they are all project documents. They are not part of the project management plans. Very well done. Laszlo, do we have time for one more, or shall we wrap up?
Go ahead.
Okay, so in that case, let's do another one. Maybe that will be the final for today. Similar assignment, we need to match the different methodologies of agile and predictive with the blue boxes on the right-hand side. So let's go with the first one. Risk register, is it predictive or agile? You can put a simple P into the chat or an A into the chat. That will also do. Yeah, I have one for predictive. Any more answers? Yeah, that's correct. So risk register is a predictive. Kanban, is it an agile or predictive? So again, A's or P's, please into the chat. Yeah, very well done. So Kanban is an agile term here. Schedule baseline, predictive or agile? Yeah, very well done. Scrum Master, A or P? Cool. Project Charter, predictive or agile? Yeah, very well done. User stories, agile or predictive? Excellent. I see another ace coming in. Now CCB, what CCB stands for? Anybody knows? CCB, what's a CCB? That's a change control board. Now, do we have change control board on agile and or predictive, or only one of them? Very well done. That's actually a good stuff. Scope statement, is it predictive or agile? Very well done. And in that case, whatever is left should be fully correct, which is going to be agile for the sprint planning. Now, this exercise, we're really trying to focusing on that you understanding the terms which are used for agile and which are used for waterfall, because in the eyes of PMI, there is a clear distinction between the two, and they are not really interfering with each other. So let me give you an example. So if you get, let's say, if there's a question around, we do a change request, having a backlog, having a project manager, then the Scrum Master is doing something. Now, this mashup is great, but the best practice never talk about, let's say, a mashup of all this together. We might do this real life, and we do cherry picking of different processes, whatever fits for us the best. But for the exam and for any kind of exam preparation, we need to ensure that we clearly distinguish what is an agile thing or an iterative incremental life cycle, or what is or adaptive, in that case, what is a predictive, aka waterfall model. Okay. Thank you very much. Laszlo, I give you back the ball. I think that was all what I really would like to kind of present today.
Wow, just like a Swiss watch on time. This is 1300, so this is 1 o'clock here in Budapest, Hungary. Gabor, I really appreciate your lovely presentation. I really like the energy, and I do hope everyone really liked it. And in the meantime, I see a number of you already completed the poll. So again, Gabor, thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for all of you coming today. Last, just a quick announcement, and let me share my screen very quickly because there is something coming and I would like to make sure that all of you are fully aware. There probably, you can see my screen, Gabor, right?
Yes.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, November the 3rd is a very important day in our life because this is the International Project Manager Day. And as usual, PMI Budapest is going to organize the Art of Projects conference on the 3rd November, which is actually a Thursday. And the 10th anniversary is here. So 10 years ago, we kicked off the Art of Projects. This year, we are going to come together again. This is going to be an in-person conference in the Budapest Music Center conference room. If you would like to read a little bit more about the program, my best advice, go to the PMI Budapest events.hu and you can read the entire program. The good news is that Mr. Tony Appleby from the US will be with us. Tony is the Chair Emeritus at Project Management Institute. We have Lala from Georgia, from the Georgian PMI chapter. We also have Greta Blush and Steve Blush from the United States from the West Coast, Laszlo Konya from Deutsche Telekom IT Solutions, and we also have Beth Olet from the United States, who's going to talk about disciplined agile and the secret sauce to your success. And last but not least, why this is going to be pretty exciting conference this year, because a gentleman whose name is Balázs Zábori, who's actually a aerospace engineer, and he's the program manager for the Hungarian to Orbit astronaut program. And he's going to tell us a little bit more about how Hungary is going to select the next astronaut who's going to work on the International Space Station. The seats are filling up very, very quickly. So if you would like to join this lovely conference this year again, please go to pmibudapestevents.hu and you can register. If you are a PMP or a CAPM or PGMP or ACP or any other PMI credential holder, you can earn 6 PDU points. And the last announcement, that the day after, on the 4th November, which is actually a Friday, we are going to organize 2 master classes here in Budapest. The first master class in the morning is all about discipline, agile, the practical application. So this is going to be led by Beth Olet from the US. And in the afternoon, we have a second one, which is talking about the hybrid project management, the best of both worlds. And this is going to be led by Greta Blush from the United States. Again, Gabor, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate that. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Very soon, we are going to organize a new lunch and learn session, and we are going to let you know what's coming, what's cooking. Again, Gabor, I really appreciate your time and effort. With that said, this is the end of the lunch and learn session on the 12th of October. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.